Well, as you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio is presented by DSI Sportsbook. If you head on over to DSI, sign up using the promo code BTB and the number 25, you'll get a $25 free bet just for signing up, 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook, and 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino as well. At BetDSI, it's only a game until you bet it. One more segment left to go here for this week on Bang the Book Radio. That is our Week 10 college football first look with Kyle Hunter of HunterSportsPicks.com. Kyle, how's it going today, man?
Hey, man, not the best day here. Picked up a bug from the kids, and I think at one point last night during the night I was listed as doubtful for the show, but playing through it, and hopefully I make some sense with my thoughts here coming off a couple hours of sleep last night.
Well, a pretty interesting weekend in Week 9. And, of course, we've got a lot of good games coming up here in Week 10. Lots of ranked matchups, lots of games that have division implications, conference implications, college football playoff implications, just tons of stuff going on here this week. And, of course, the return of Tuesday and Wednesday night MACtion, which we'll hit on a little bit here as well. But before we get into our look ahead, let's take a look back. We'll take a look back at Week 9 here. Some injury news, some notes, some stats, some trends, that type of thing. We like to call this our quick hitters segment. Kyle, what's the first point you've got here for this week?
Well, first up, I want to say that Arizona is now third in the nation in yards per play. That's pretty amazing when you think about how much they struggled early in the season. How about Tate? His numbers have been amazing the last few games, video game type numbers. Arizona's a really interesting team to me now. And when I was looking at yards per play, certainly I knew Arizona would be up there pretty high, but third, that's really impressive.
Khalil Tate, 13.4 yards per carry on 69 attempts. It's ridiculous what that kid's doing here. And I got to ask you this. I kind of wonder, I mean, did this kid save Rich Rod's job?
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, he was definitely on the hot seat there. You kind of wonder how Tate didn't get the job sooner, but good for Rich Rod and Arizona that he got it when he did, because he's definitely doing some special things now. He comes up against some defenses here in the next few weeks that have not been very good at stopping the run. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him keep putting up some pretty big numbers here. So we'll see what happens. The next one on my list, New Mexico. They finished -7 in turnover margin last week against Wyoming. Wyoming had 309 yards in that game and 42 points. This is crazy to me, too, because the Sharps keep steaming at New Mexico every single week. I mean, they're catching money like crazy. They did it a couple of weeks ago against Fresno State. I think the final score was like 38-0 in that one. And then last week, against Wyoming, 42-3. So New Mexico's kind of been a darling of some sharp players, and we'll see if that changes now.
Yeah, that will be very interesting to watch. I mean, you go -7 in turnover margin, that's going to be a big-time problem for you. But also New Mexico, only 2.9 yards per carry in this game. So, it was kind of interesting to look at the Lobos coming into the year anyway, coming off of an impressive season, a bowl performance, and then Bob Davie, with some of those allegations earlier on in the year about mistreatment of players, we weren't entirely sure what we were going to get out in New Mexico as this season went along. Had a nice win at Tulsa, although we found out Tulsa's not very good. Scored 56 against Air Force. Last 3 weeks, I mean, they played well against Colorado State 2 weeks ago, but shut out at Fresno, shut out at Wyoming. They're laying 4.5 here this week against Utah State, and I think this is a game that, will give us a pretty good barometer, because a lot of money came in against Utah State last week against Boise State. If money comes in New Mexico here again this week, could be a last stand from the sharp bettors out there.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see that one. I don't think Utah State's that good of a team, but I wouldn't want to be laying 4.5 points with New Mexico either. So we'll see what happens with that one. Next on my list, Iowa State beats TCU 14-7. Here's a misleading game. TCU averaged 5.2 yards per play. Iowa State 3.75. The -2 turnover margin is what beat TCU in that one primarily. Still, Iowa State's really a great story this year. You got to give props to Matt Campbell and this coaching staff.
Matt Campbell's doing a phenomenal job there, and I actually wrote up my Northern Illinois Toledo preview, and it kind of makes me wonder if Jason Candle might get looked at for a bigger job here this summer, because the Rockets have over 7 yards per play, comes from that Campbell coaching tree, and with what Campbell's doing, a lot of times there's kind of a subsequent effect with the assistants, especially if they stay around at the previous program or if they're, still on the current staff. Sometimes those guys get a little bit more of a look as well. I will say this. This isn't a game that we're going to talk about. I'm sure we'll talk about it as we go throughout the week here with some of our other handicappers, but it is going to be very, very hard for me to not have a West Virginia ticket here this week, despite how they shot themselves in the foot so many times there in that game against Oklahoma State. But for Iowa State, it's a great story. I just wonder, how long they can keep this up.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if I like West Virginia in that game or not. I haven't looked at it very much yet. But, West Virginia's had a lot of problems on defense. Iowa State clearly the better defense there. West Virginia the more dynamic offense. And, West Virginia with a really good home field advantage. So an interesting game. We'll see what Iowa State's made of in that one. Certainly they've been a really big surprise here so far this year. And a lot credit goes to the coaching staff there.
Let me ask you something real quickly here before we move on from that point. So Iowa State's 14th in the country right now. Where are they in your power ratings? How far up are they in those?
I haven't updated all my power ratings so far for this week, so it's kind of hard for me to say I think last week Iowa State was somewhere in the 20s. They're not 14th, I know that. So yeah, I haven't updated this week, so I'm not sure. They'll move up, but they won't be 14th.
Okay, I was just curious because I have them in the upper 30s in the lower 30s in mine. They're 30, 31 range, and yeah, I'm just wondering maybe I'm too skeptical of this team. So I was kind of curious to get your thoughts and then sort of gauge against where you had them.
I had Iowa State 29th last week, so I assume they'll move up a few spots. They'll probably be 24th or something like that. So I think Iowa State's not the 14th best team in the country, but maybe a little bit better than you think they are.
All right, fair enough. What's the next point you've got for the quick hitters?
A couple of injuries here. Ball State's had a terrible season, first of all. Talking about power ratings teams that are just brutal. Moved way down in the power ratings throughout the course of the season. Ball State's down to their fourth-string quarterback now after their third-string guy broke his ankle last game. So fourth-string quarterback going to start this next game. Ball State can outscore. Bad defense. It's hard to make a number big enough on Ball State right now, but this is a team that's really just been torn apart by injuries, and they have nothing right now.
No, they really don't. And I finally made the right adjustment. I actually dropped them 9 points in my power ratings this week because it was clear that I had underestimated the Neal and the Gilbert injuries for them. Then you take away yet another quarterback. My number is still actually short this week against Eastern Michigan. I've got it 22. Market's out there at 24 most places, but at least I'm finally in the ballpark here. And by dropping them 9 points, they rank 129th in my power ratings. So, yeah, this is a team where injuries have just completely crippled them.
Yeah, I was about to ask where they are in your power ratings. I assume, what are they, second worst to UTEP or something?
Yeah, UTEP. Poor UTEP.
Yeah, I figured we could count on the Miners being at the bottom. So, But Ball State is just terrible. The next one I wanted to talk about was UMass. Andrew Ford, their quarterback, was taken off on a stretcher last game. He's been playing really well for UMass. They've been putting up a decent amount of points. Their offense wasn't near as good after he went out last game. I don't really have a good update on him as far as what his status is going forward, but obviously when they take you off on a stretcher and check for neck injuries, you'd think that they would be pretty cautious with him moving forward. He's listed as questionable right now against Mississippi State this weekend. You'd have to say it'd be a surprise if he plays.
Yeah, it certainly would. Ford is a guy, 64% completion percentage, 13-3 touchdown interception ratio. And he is a guy that has taken a beating here over the last 3 years for UMass, but he's one of those guys that you generally don't think too much about it when you talk about UMass or maybe a team like New Mexico State with Tyler Rogers. But as far as the drop-off from starter to the backup, this is one of the bigger ones in the country for me.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this would be a really significant drop-off, and I think that there's going to be a decent amount of people that want to grab the points with UMass there in what would be a spot that you might assume Mississippi State would look over them. But if Ford's not playing, I wouldn't be interested in doing that. I had one more note here. Coastal Carolina crushed by Texas State last week. That was the strangest game when I was looking at box scores and trying to look for misleading games and things like that. Texas State's been really bad throughout the season. I really don't know what happened in that game. Coastal had been at least somewhat competitive in their last few games, and here they just get blown out by Texas State. You look at that game, Texas State went 27-7. Coastal doesn't score an offensive touchdown all game. And as far as I can tell, it looks like Coastal didn't pass the 50-yard line on offense at any point, so they never got into Texas State territory. Just a really terrible showing from them.
It's been a really weird year for Coastal. I mean, they've been down their starting quarterback and their backup a couple times. Their head coach took a medical leave of absence before the season, their first year transitioning over to FBS. So, but then they've had some of these games where they've played really well and have actually pulled off, some minor upsets or won as a small favorite. So, to me, they're just a team I don't touch right now. They're getting 24.5 against Arkansas this week, but I'm not particularly interested in that. One other injury I want to mention here. Peyton Ramsey for Indiana went down with a knee injury. It did not look good, helmet to knee. Richard Lago now going to be the guy that goes back under center for Indiana, or back behind center, I guess I should say. And this is a guy who started the year for them, played pretty well in that game against Ohio State, throwing the ball 65 times, completed 40 of them. Since then, not a whole lot to write home about, and I was kind of surprised that, to me, it doesn't really look like there was an adjustment in the market for Indiana here, despite what I see to be a pretty significant downgrade at quarterback.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there should be a huge downgrade. I think that, Legault has had his moments. The problem with him is that he doesn't take care of the ball well. And, he can rack up a bunch of yards, but he throws the pick sixes too often, things like that. Ramsey was more of a running threat, and he seemed to take care of the ball better. I think Legault has a decent upside, but he hasn't proven it very consistently. Like you said, he certainly looked good against Ohio State in that first game, but we'll see if he can do it on a consistent basis.
All right, so we'll get into some of these game breaks here, and we'll start with Tuesday night. We got a couple of MACtion games to mention here. No line on the Miami of Ohio and Ohio game, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. And I know you said you really haven't updated your power ratings yet, so I don't know if you can answer this question, but I'm sort of curious. Gus Ragland is expected to play in this game, which obviously he's a significant adjustment to the line, probably looking at a 4.5, 5-point line adjustment if he's able to go. So do you have numbers in front of you here in terms of what this number would be with him and without him?
Yeah, let me pull it up here real quick. So this is a game that I haven't done much looking at, obviously. But I think that with him playing, you said, what is he listed as right now?
I think he's listed mostly as probable. I haven't seen anything that would indicate that he's not going to play, and you got a little bit of extra prep time, of course, with this Tuesday night game. But I've seen expected to play. I've seen questionable. I've kind of seen it all over the map here. Okay,
so I think if Ragland plays, I think Ohio is still going to be a decent favorite in this game. Ohio may be minus 6.5, something like that. If Ragland does not play, Ohio is going to be a pretty significant favorite. I'll say minus 10.5, something like that.
All right. I had it -4 with Ragland and -9 without him. And part of that is because I think I haven't really fully adjusted to Ohio here. And the fact that all of a sudden, this is a really, really potent Bobcat offense. But Ohio's 0.8 points per game here so far this year. They're 10th in scoring average. They scored more than 40 points just once in a game last season. So this is an offense that all of a sudden is doing some significant work. The offensive line has played very well, only 13 sacks allowed in 8 games. They've got over 6 yards per play. Ohio, to me, is a team that I just haven't adjusted properly with Rourke at the helm. 6.3 yards per carry, 10-3 touchdown interception ratio. Ohio looks like they're a very legit team at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. And Ohio's defense is solid. They're 28th in yards per play allowed. Miami's 55th. Certainly Ohio has to be favored by a decent amount in this game, no matter what. I think Solich is a really underrated coach. He's done a really good job there at Ohio and continues to do so this year.
What's really interesting about Ohio is that he's had both of his coordinators for 13 years in a row. And you talk about all the college football turnover here, and that level of continuity is something that makes Ohio a really solid, underrated team because they just win 8 or 9 games almost every year. And looks like they're on pace to do that here this year and possibly win the MAC for the first time in about 40 years. So, or 50 years, I should say. So we'll see if that comes to fruition for them. We do have a line on the Bowling Green Kent State game, and this is a game that people will bet because it's a Tuesday night. And other than that, they really wouldn't pay attention to it. But Bowling Green is a road favorite at Kent State here, favored by 1.5. My numbers actually have Kent State a slight favorite here of 2. I guess I understand why Bowling Green is a road favorite, but it's hard to touch either one of these two teams.
Oh, this is a brutal game. The only reason people are going to be interested in this game is because they're betting on it. Nothing exciting about this game at all. I really don't have interest in this game. I think my numbers will make it about exactly a pick 'em. Kent State's offense is terrible. They're second worst in yards per play so far this year. I think you can probably guess who's worst. UTEP, the Miners again. Bowling Green has 19 turnovers this year. Bowling Green last year and this year has had real problems taking care of the football. They're a team that moves the ball a decent amount but isn't very efficient on offense because they turn it over in the red zone consistently. So neither of these teams I'm interested in backing. Neither defense has been very good. Kent State's defense has been a little bit disappointing compared to last year. And, Kent State, they've got nothing on offense. I think it makes a little bit of sense for Bowling Green to be favored here. But at the same time, do you really want to take Bowling Green as a road favorite? I don't.
No, I don't either. And part of that for Kent State, too, is that their offense has just been so bad that it's going to carry over to the defensive side of the ball. But, hey, like we said, I mean, it's an ESPNU game. It's MACtion. Most people will be more interested in Miami and Ohio, and as well they should be. But still, if you do wager on this game, I've got a preview up over at BangTheBook.com. Just be smart about your money in these MACtion games because, we are talking about some teams that are kind of inherently high variance. A lot of times in the MAC, everybody kind of beats everybody unless you've got that really, really remarkable team like a Western Michigan last year, who Western Michigan plays on Wednesday night here in Kalamazoo. They take on Central Michigan in one of those directional rivalries. This number opens 7. It's come down to 6.5 here, and this was a number I was really interested in seeing because for Western Michigan, is the season with Franklin and Bogan drawing the majority of that. But still, when they've needed to, they've gotten those. And you kind of know that's going to be the case.
I think this number might be a little bit too short. My lean would be Western Michigan in this game. You got a passing team in Central Michigan, a running team in Western Michigan. I'm not convinced that Central Michigan is going to be able to stop the run here. I think Western Michigan can be fairly one-dimensional and get away with it in this game. Western Michigan's pass defense isn't anything tremendous, but they're okay. I just think Central Michigan is one of those teams that they caught a few people off guard there earlier this season, probably a little bit better than they were supposed to be. I still think there's quite a bit more talent at Western Michigan than there is at Central Michigan. So my opinion would be that this -6.5 is a little bit short. I am surprised that the line has dropped here from -7 down to 6.5.
Yeah, I had this one at 8.5. I think I made a 2-point adjustment to Wasink being out, and who knows? I mean, it could wind up being more than that. We'll see how Reese Goddard is in this game. He only had 3 pass attempts last week, and of course, like I said, being a freshman, those were the only 3 pass attempts he's had here far. So I think that there's a little bit of an unknown factor here to this one, and maybe that's the numbers grab is just sort of wondering, okay, if Central Michigan floods the box and forces Western Michigan to beat them through the air, if they can do that, then, maybe this is a game that does wind up being a fairly tight, really low-scoring type of affair. On the other hand, for Central Michigan here, just a very high-variance team offensively. Shane Morris has put up some huge numbers in some games, has put up some bad numbers in others. Of course, he's a Michigan transfer. So, I don't know. This one feels like a high-variance game to me. In my preview, I had a small lean to Central Michigan to go against my power ratings at 8.5 just because, like I said, I don't know what you get from Western Michigan through the air. I know what you get in a ground game, but, how effective can it be if Central Michigan's got 10 guys in the box every play? So, I don't know. I'll be curious to see how this one plays out. And again, with a standalone game on a Wednesday night, we're going to see a lot of investment in it.
Yeah, I agree on a lot of variance in this game. It's not one that I'll end up betting. My numbers are certainly going to make it a lean to Western Michigan, but I'm going to pass on this game unless they put the number too high and play the under.
All right, we'll touch on the Thursday and Friday games with other guests here as we go throughout the week, but let's go ahead and go to Saturday, and let's start with a big one here between Clemson and North Carolina State. Game 325, 326 on the rotation order, and right now it looks like Clemson – little bit of the preferred side here. This one opens 7 flat with minus 110 on both sides at Bookmaker. Lots of 7s with extra juice. A few 7.5s have popped out there in the marketplace as well. Clemson getting a little bit of the initial investment here for this one.
I'm not surprised that Clemson's getting a little bit of investment here early on. My number's going to make this a little bit bigger than this for sure. NC State was a little disappointing to me last week. I thought that NC State would be a team that could match up pretty well against Notre Dame, and that NC State's defensive front is their strength. Notre Dame runs the ball all the time. NC State didn't do as well as I thought they would in that game. And Clemson, I feel like this is one of those spots where they're going to be highly motivated. And when you get a Dabo Swinney team that's well prepared for a game, they've played extremely well in big games. So my lean here would be Clemson. I think that Clemson will be very good in the trenches, especially on the defensive end. I think they'll be in the backfield quite a bit here. NC State's offensive line, not up to the task, I don't think. Having said that, the question is how much is Clemson going to score here? Clemson's offense has not been extremely consistent throughout the year. Part of that because of injury issues, but I think the upside for Clemson is so much higher than it is for NC State. And like I said, I don't think there's any reason to expect anything other than a very motivated Clemson team here.
I think that this one's a little bit of a challenging handicap because I really like and I really like the job that he's done. And the best part about NC State is that they don't hurt themselves. And in that last game, they only threw one interception, or they threw one interception. Ryan wasn't particularly efficient, just 17 of 37. Maybe that's a commentary on Notre Dame. Maybe it's a commentary on Notre Dame being a better team than we originally thought, because that was a game where the number did move down a little bit on NC State. It opened 8.5, wound up going down to about 7, and Notre Dame was pretty much in control of that game throughout. So maybe Notre Dame is just better than we thought, but better than we expected. Maybe the game last week isn't as much of a commentary on NC State. Now, of course, for Clemson here, this coming into the season looked like a really horrible spot. You're coming off the option game against Georgia Tech. You go on the road to take on NC State, and then you've got this huge matchup against Florida State on deck. Well, Florida State looks a lot different right now than they looked coming into the season. So in this particular spot here where, you look at this game and you look at Clemson, would have been a 6.5-point favorite coming into the year. Now they're a 7.5-point favorite. You take away what looks like a bad look-ahead spot with Florida State, and you get a little bit truer of a line here. So the fact that this number hasn't moved from the summer, it makes me wonder what the perception is of Clemson. Defensively, they're very good on the defensive line, exceptional. But Kelly Bryant, while he showed signs early on in the year, since he's been banged up, this offense really hasn't done a whole lot. 28 against Wake, 24 against Syracuse, 24 against Georgia Tech. Like you said, that's the question, is how many can Clemson score here when they're asked to cover 7.5 on the road against a pretty efficient, pretty stout defensive team?
Yeah, I think the under would be a lean in this game. It would be interesting to see what kind of total they put on this game. But, Clemson's defense has a big edge, like we said, but the offense is the question mark. I like Dave Doran, certainly, but Clemson has a small coaching advantage, at least, with Dabo Swinney. And, this is just a Clemson team that has more talent than North Carolina State does. NC State has a really good defensive line, but Clemson's defensive line is even better. It's hard to find a spot on the field where NC State is significantly better than Clemson. There's a decent amount where you can find Clemson is definitely better than NC State. I lean Clemson very slightly here, but I will either be taking the under if the number is high enough or passing on this game.
I mean, I've got this one 7.5, so I'm right there on the number. But one thing I will point out here about NC State is last week was really bad for them in a lot of different ways. For one thing, they didn't play particularly well against Notre Dame, lost by 3 touchdowns. Louisville didn't look good, and Florida State looked absolutely atrocious. So the two signature wins that NC State has this season, they're getting cheaper in value as we go throughout the year here. And at that point, you do kind of question, okay, how good is this NC State team? What is the ceiling for this team? And that's one of the key things you have to do as you go throughout the season is continue to reevaluate the body of work so far. And right now, like I said, those wins over Florida State and Louisville don't look as good as they did at the time.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's interesting is to see what happens with the line because of things like that. Perception's going to change based on, those were really good wins. Maybe they weren't great wins. So, Clemson has had some good wins for sure. NC State, we're not sure about that. So I think they still have some to prove.
All right, let's go to Bedlam here. Game 391, 392, enormous game in the Big 12 between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. A little bit of Oklahoma investment here overnight and in the morning hours to drop this number down to 3 with some reduced juice, those that want to play Oklahoma State. 3 minus 15. There is a 3 minus 10 out there at Pinnacle. And, obviously this game just means so much, not just for these two teams, but also for the Big 12 Conference, because with TCU losing that game last week to Iowa State, now all of a sudden you look at the Big 12 and you say, okay, it's going to be really, really difficult for this conference to put anybody in the college football playoff. Iowa State tied atop the conference at 4-1, but they've already lost 2 games. Oklahoma's got a loss. Oklahoma State has a loss. So, this is a game where these two teams, I think, really need to stand out to try and impress the College Football Playoff Committee and the College Football Playoff rankings.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that Oklahoma is the team that would have the best chance, obviously, with that win in Columbus. But this is a tricky game for them, and they don't really have an easy schedule in general. Oklahoma's played a tougher schedule than Oklahoma State has so far this year. First of all, I think this number is right on. I think -3 is a good number here. Based on the matchup, I have looked at this game a decent amount already. I kind of like Oklahoma State, not from thinking I have a great value in the number, but Oklahoma's weakness here on defense has been the pass defense. Ohio State at that point in the season was not able to expose their weakness. Obviously Ohio State's pass offense has played better since then, but at that point Ohio State's pass offense was just not very good. We know Oklahoma State's passing offense is really good. So I think Oklahoma State can exploit those weaknesses. The other thing I would say is that as much as I've been worried about Oklahoma State's defense throughout the course of the season, they've been a lot better than Oklahoma. Oklahoma State's 21st in yards per play allowed so far this year. I think Oklahoma somewhere down around 50. So, this is a spot where Oklahoma State, their defense has been better than I thought it would be. They're actually 19th in yards per play allowed. So Oklahoma State's been pretty good defensively. I still think they're going to give up quite a few yards and points in this game, and obviously it's going to be a really high posted total. They have a good home field advantage there as well, so we got to take that into account, and it's going to be a great environment for football. At -3, my lean is OK State.
I've got this number 3.5, and I was kind of surprised to see a little bit of initial movement on Oklahoma because I think you can get 3.5 later on in the week because I think perception is higher on the Cowboys, and I think you just talked about it a little bit there too. Statistically speaking, this game does favor Oklahoma State, so I think as limits increase later in the week, I think we probably do see 3.5 pop again. So if you like Oklahoma State, I would take it now. If you like Oklahoma, I think I'd probably wait on it a little bit. But this is one of those spots where Oklahoma State's lost 12 of the last 14 rivalry games against Oklahoma. So they're 2-12 in the last 14 Bedlam matchups. This is probably the best shot that they've had to win that game in quite some time. With Mason Rudolph, with Justice Hill in this running game, with a much improved defense, with an Oklahoma team that's got a first-year head coach in Lincoln Riley, who's obviously done a good job, and he's done a good job with the offense. But, you can kind of see defensively here where the Sooners do have some problems, and they have given up some points to some offenses that just aren't particularly great. So I think if you're Oklahoma State here, you're feeling like, hey, boys, this is the best chance we've got here to, maybe try to string something together in this rivalry. And I think that means a lot to this Oklahoma State team. So I was surprised to see the initial move. I think at 3 minus 15, it's almost right on my number. But if I had to play something in this game, and for those that are maybe in contests or something like that, it would be Oklahoma State or nothing for me here.
Yeah, me as well. I agree with your point as well that, Oklahoma State hasn't had very many chances to beat Oklahoma. And this is a shot for them. I feel like, Gundy is good at motivating his team. I think they'll be well prepared for this game, and it's going to be a really good environment for football. I think at -3, I do like Oklahoma State some.
All right, we got a huge game here in the Big Ten. Noon kickoff in East Lansing, game 4:15, 4:16 between Penn State and Michigan State. Penn State's a 7.5-point road favorite here in this one. This number opened 9. It has since come down, and I actually have this number a little bit higher. I've got it 11.5. So, I'm not necessarily surprised by the move, but it does go against my numbers. And maybe I just didn't adjust Penn State enough. But, man, this is a horrible spot for Penn State.
Yeah, I'm glad. I was going to ask you what your line was. I did update my power ratings for both of these teams, and I have 10.5. So, I knew the line would move down based on a situational spot grab. It's going to be hard for me to take Penn State. I don't think I could take Penn State. I guess the question is where does this line go? I see, it's about down to 7. I mean, you get 7.5 and extra juice on Michigan State. Chris, if this line gets down to 7 or below, it's certainly at least a little bit tempting to take Penn State. Penn State's certainly the better team. There's no doubt about that. Penn State was badly outgained last week against Ohio State. Penn State's special teams almost won them the game there. Their offensive line was really dominated in the second half by Ohio State. I don't think Michigan State has the defensive line that Ohio State does, but Michigan State has a good defensive line. So we'll see how Penn State's offensive front holds up in this one. Penn State's a really good team. Definitely have to still be in the top 4 or 5 in your power ratings. Michigan State, I think they're a good team. I think they're not in the same level certainly not in the same level as Penn State. But like you said, a brutal, brutal spot for Penn State. This is going to tell us a lot about James Franklin and how good he is at trying to get his team ready in a really difficult spot.
There's something I wanted to make sure that I made a note of here on the show today, and that was, the camera panned in on James Franklin quite a bit there in that game, and obviously it had plenty of reason to in the fourth quarter as Ohio State was coming back. But there were a few things that I really noticed about James Franklin, and I had heard him a couple of months ago over the summer on, I think it was XM College Sports or something like that, and I was very, very impressed listening to him. He gave a lot of credit to Joe Moorhead, who of course deserves a lot of credit, but very eloquent, spoke, in great terms about the program, and there were a few defining moments in this game against Ohio State. Anytime he had a player that was injured, came out and checked on him, and I give him a lot of credit for that. Maybe it slows down the game, or maybe people don't want to see the head coach have that much of an emotional attachment, whatever. I thought it was really nice to see. But there was a play early on in the game. Penn State's in complete control. Ohio State is scrambling in a big way, and I think it was a late hit call on a kick return or punt return, something like that. Number 11 was the guy that did it. And he came over to the sideline, and a lot of times coaches just berate the hell out of a kid. They will embarrass him in front of everybody on that sideline. James Franklin sat him down on the bench, behind all the players, behind all the coaches, said what he needed to say, and then got up and walked away. And he did it man to man. And I thought that was extremely impressive. So I don't worry as much about Penn State in this spot. I think James Franklin can look at this team and say, hey, guys, remember when we beat Ohio State last year and they still made it in the college football playoff? Well, there's still time for us. If we get some help, if we get, if Michigan knocks off Ohio State in the last regular season game, we get that crack at Wisconsin, we can put ourselves right there in the college football playoff. So I think he's got that recent motivating factor, and I think he's also the kind of guy that understands the pulse of this program. Also, like you said, they're just a better team. Now, the flip side of this coin is Brian Lewerke for Michigan State has quietly put up some extremely good numbers. 61.4% completion percentage, 14-4 touchdown interception ratio, 4.6 yards per carry is the second leading rusher for Michigan State. Now, J.T. Barrett had a phenomenal fourth quarter. It was the best I've ever seen J.T. Barrett play. But there are some similarities between Lewerke and Barrett had a lot of success against Penn State. Now, obviously, Michigan State doesn't have the same level of athletes on the outside that Ohio State has. Probably doesn't have the same level of offensive line either. But with Penn State having to cover 7.5 here against a team that has some similarities to the team that just beat them, I could see why there's a little bit of worry about the Nittany Lions side here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game that's a fascinating handicap. You know, we like games like this where there's a lot of different moving parts, and you try to figure out which way to think because, I mean, you could make a good case for either team here. I mean, it'd be easy to say Penn State's in a really bad spot. You're getting more than a touchdown. Take Michigan State. On the other hand, it'd be really easy to say this is an overreaction to the spot. Penn State's just that much better of a team. Yeah, Barrett played amazing in that fourth quarter. I mean, he played well all game, played amazing in that fourth quarter against Penn State. Lewerke's not as good as Barrett, but he can do some of the same things. I've been impressed by his mobility. I think he's a very good runner. He's very shifty. He follows his blockers well. So I think he could do some damage there in the run game. I don't know how much he'll do in the passing game. You know, Michigan State doesn't have that many good wide receivers. They certainly I wouldn't say Ohio State has great wide receivers either, but Michigan State's are worse. Penn State to me is still a really, really talented team. And like we both said, they have a big talent edge in this game. If this game gets down to 7, it's going to be interesting to see what happens because I do think that, wouldn't you think that if it gets down to 7, there's going to be some involvement on Penn State?
I think there has to be. I mean, I think the move here early in the week, like we talked about, is largely related to the spot. And I think the power ratings guys that have it higher, like you and I do, expected that movement because of the spot. So I do think if this gets to 7, or if it miraculously somehow gets to 6.5, I think you definitely see some sharp involvement there from the numbers guys.
Yeah, I mean, I probably won't touch this game, but if it gets below 7, you have to take a second look because Penn State's still a really good team.
One more thing here while we're talking about the Big Ten, I guess I'll throw out a mea culpa because when Michigan and Florida played in week 1, I talked up Jim McElwain quite a bit, especially relative to Jim Harbaugh. And obviously that one didn't age particularly well with Jim McElwain now fired from Florida. So I'll throw a little bit of a mea culpa there on that one. I still think Jim McElwain's a good coach. I think he was in a bad situation with expectations that are way too high at Florida. I'll be curious to see where he lands now. But, hey, obviously Harbaugh outlasted him, although to be fair, Harbaugh really hasn't done a whole lot with Michigan. So I stand by what I said about Harbaugh not being that great of a coach. But obviously with McElwain out of the picture, that hot take of mine didn't age particularly well. All right, let's get into the Pick 6 segment here. 6 games, rapid-fire fashion, then we'll kick the extra point with Kyle's exclusive free pick. Let's go to Thursday night here, the game that kind of started it all when it comes to #MACtion. Northern Illinois catching 9 on the road against Toledo.
Yeah, I remember that game very well. To me, this number is really good. I'll take Northern Illinois plus the points because I think their defense can do enough. Toledo is certainly the better team here. I won't bet this game as far as the side. The total, Northern Illinois' defense has been pretty good this year. Their offense not that efficient. I mean, this total is certainly going to be in the 60s. I don't think I can take the over, but I'll lean toward Northern Illinois in a game that might be a little bit lower scoring than those normal MACtion games.
I'm going to go the other way here. I'm going to take Toledo. Northern Illinois this year, they've played well defensively, but they've played the likes of Boston College, Nebraska, San Diego State. They haven't played anybody that can throw a forward pass with any level of efficiency. Toledo can do that. So even though my number is right on here, I think my number is actually 9 on this game. I still think Toledo would be my preferred side if I had to make a play. And with a 6 o'clock game on a Thursday night, pretty decent chance that I'll fall into that trap. How about we go to Friday here? Game 317-318. Marshall takes on Florida Atlantic. The Owls are predominantly a 9.5-point favorite in the market, but there are a couple 10s as well.
Yeah, Marshall was in a really bad spot there last week against FIU. FIU had a bye week. Marshall was in that letdown spot. NTSU is a team that has been a rival of Marshall lately, and then they could also be looking ahead to this game. So, I was surprised Marshall lost. I wasn't surprised they didn't cover the spread. To me, Florida Atlantic's really been playing some good football here of late. I hate to go against them. I guess I'll lean Florida Atlantic in this one. I think Marshall's still a good team. Marshall's a good defense, but their defense hasn't really played that many good offenses. And Florida Atlantic has really been rolling on offense of late. So at under 10, I'll lean to Florida Atlantic.
My number on this game is 7, and I'll write up the preview here later on today for BangTheBook.com. And I honestly don't know what way I'm going to go with this game because I wanted to fade Marshall. I wanted to fade the stats that their defense has because they've put them up against some really bad teams. Looks like I missed the boat because last week was the spot to fade Marshall. Now this week, I'm not really sure. I'd probably still lean Florida Atlantic just to go against that Marshall defense. Wouldn't be a particularly strong play for me. Let's go to Saturday here. Game 335, 336. Ohio State, 16-point favorites. There are some 16.5s out there as well. On the road against Iowa in what is not a good spot at all for Ohio State with Michigan State at home on deck.
I think this number is really good. I won't bet this game. I know I won't bet this game side or total. Very slightly into Iowa. You might be able to catch 17. It looks like it was 17 at the open. It'll probably get to 17 again. So if you like Iowa, you can probably get a 17. Just because of the spot for Ohio State. Ohio State has a lot more talent than does Iowa. But, like you said, off that huge win and then Michigan State next week, it's a difficult spot for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, my number's right on 16. I know the 5 Dimes look-ahead line for this game last week was 21, and a listener reached out about that, and I told him to grab it because I had the number at 16, and I didn't make an adjustment to either team off of last week. I had the Ohio State-Penn State number almost right where it was, so I didn't adjust the Buckeyes at all. So 16's right on my number, but again, from a spot standpoint, it's got to be a look at Iowa here in this one. All right, game 341, 342, Virginia Tech, 2.5-point road favorite against Miami, Florida.
This is a hard game. Miami looked really bad in that game against North Carolina last week. I had the under in that one and cashed. Miami's offense really looked bad in that game. I know North Carolina's defense was playing decent of late. North Carolina's offense has been the problem. But, Virginia Tech has a really good defense. Fuente is doing a good job with this team. I'm going to take a really slight lean to Miami just because I still think their defense is extremely good as well. I think we'll probably be able to catch a 3 with Miami here based on the initial line move. So I like Miami just a little bit, but this is a tough one.
This is a really tough one. Malik Rozier didn't practice on Sunday, had a shoulder injury on Saturday in a game where Miami barely escaped against North Carolina, who was playing a kid at quarterback that had never played at the collegiate level before. So, that's not really a great thing for Miami, who's also won a lot of close games here lately. I adjusted Virginia Tech up quite a bit in my power ratings because it's time for me to start respecting what they've done, and I still have Miami as a 1-point favorite. So my lean would be to Miami, but again, I know a lot of people are very, very skeptical of the Hurricanes, so I do think that this number goes up. I think if you like Miami, it's certainly in your best interest to wait around a little bit here. All right, let's throw some shitty games at you because I haven't done that the last couple of weeks, and it feels like a good time to do that. Game 369, 370, Cincinnati on the road against Tulane. Tulane's a 5.5-point favorite here, down from 6.5, so a very interesting line move.
Nice. I'll take Tulane here. I do kind of like this one. Tulane's played a lot better at home. Cincinnati still has a lot to prove. I think Fickle will do a good job there, but he didn't get put in a very good situation at Cincinnati. Cincinnati's not used to defending the type of offense that Tulane runs. I'll take Tulane and -5.5.
Yeah, this is one of those games where the numbers started moving around, and I'm kind of scratching my head. Like, I don't get it. I have this number Tulane -12, and I haven't been a believer in Cincinnati, and I've actually adjusted Tulane down over the last few weeks because they had the backdoor cover against South Florida, which is what it is. Did not play well the previous week against FIU. Did not play well last week against Memphis in a blowout. I've been adjusting Tulane down a little bit, and I still have this number nowhere near where it's at in the market. So maybe Cincinnati suddenly got better. I don't know, but I'm not really buying it here in this spot. I would definitely look to take Tulane as well. Here's a line that I'm not entirely sure I get, but I haven't been able to rate either one of these teams throughout the year. Game 383, 384, North Texas catching 3.5 against Louisiana Tech. I've had no clue on Louisiana Tech games all year.
Yeah, this is a really hard one. Louisiana Tech's not been near as good as I thought they would be this year. Clearly a downgrade at quarterback from last year to this year. I think they have a good coaching staff. I like what North Texas is doing. I'm going to take La Tech in this game. -3.5 seems pretty short to me. I know my power ratings number will be bigger than that. I like Mason Fine, North Texas's quarterback. North Texas' defense is bad, though. I mean, Louisiana Tech's not a very good defense either. But, minus 3.5 at home, I'll take Louisiana Tech.
Yeah, my number is 7, but I've been off multiple points on every Louisiana Tech game over like the last 6 weeks. So I just don't know what the hell I'm doing with them. And they lost a ton coming into this year. They've basically revamped the entire offense. And I mean, I don't know what to do with that game. So I'll stay off of it. But for the purposes of this segment, I guess I'll take Louisiana Tech because my numbers do tell me to take that, even though I don't trust them at all. All right, let's kick the extra point here. What is the exclusive free pick you've got for show listeners?
First of all, I just thought that last week's play was Washington, and if I'd have been feeling a little better, I probably would have bashed Jim Mora Jr. a little bit earlier in the show. But I did just want to mention that, UCLA was a good fade there last week. I hope everybody took that one. It ended up being a premium play for me. UCLA, a team that's just a mess. They have way too much talent to be doing that. So just a quick knock on him before I give this free pick this week. But the play for this week, I'll take Colorado State minus 2.5. It's partially what I said earlier in the show. First of all, I think Colorado State is better than what they played here the last couple of weeks. That offense is really good, and I think they can put up points on just about anybody. Wyoming first in the nation in turnover margin. I think that's going to regress. That's going to come back to the mean. Colorado State off a disappointing performance. I see this as a good bounce-back spot, so I'm going to take Colorado State minus 2.5.
I absolutely love this play. I've got this game much, much higher in my power ratings. And you look at the last 3 weeks for Colorado State, play the Nevada Air Raid, the New Mexico option, and the Air Force option. Now they get a more traditional pro-style offense to face, something that's easier to game plan for because you see it a lot more often. I think Colorado State's a great, great look this week. That's one that I'll be on as well, and I hope our listeners can get it here under 2.5, or under 3, I should say. Kyle Hunter of HunterSportsPicks.com. What else is going on over at the website right now?
Well, 16-5 in my last 21 college football plays. Lowered the price again for the rest of the season. $275 for all college football totals the rest of the season. $375 for all college football plays. Message me, Kyle at HunterSportsPicks.com or at KyleHunterPicks on Twitter for that. Also sign up for that free pick newsletter there at HunterSportsPicks.com. Split the free picks this past weekend, 58 and 26 in my last 84 free picks.
And you can follow Kyle on Twitter at KyleHunterPicks. Kyle Hunter, hope you feel better, man, and we'll talk to you again next week. And I want to work in some college basketball next week as well, so be prepared for that.
I appreciate it. Thanks, man.